Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the epic 137-year run of the Maurya Empire. We're going to be looking at a seriously mind-blowing period of ancient Indian history, stretching from 322 BC all the way to 185 BC. It's a massive sweeping tale full of raw ambition, unspeakable violence, and ultimately a really profound transformation that literally changed the course of human history forever.
Right off the bat, let's dive into what is basically the ultimate paradox of ancient history. We're going to explore how a literal street orphan built this terrifying military superpower that eventually controlled 50 million people. But then, his heir, a guy wielding absolute, unquestioned power, turns around and just gives up war entirely. I mean, think about it. How exactly does an empire built on rivers of blood actually find peace?
Part 1. The Orphan Emperor. Okay, so picture this. In the 4th century BC, the Indian subcontinent is incredibly fragmented. The northern plains are dominated by the wealthy Nanda Empire, ruling from what is modern-day Patna. They had huge armies and overflowing treasuries, sure, but they were absolutely despised by their own people. The Nandas were ruthless. They squeezed the commoners dry through these heavy, merciless taxes and provided zero real services in return. This one-sided extortion created a total powder keg of resentment. And that was the perfect breeding ground for a young guy named Chandragupta Maurya, who by most accounts was a street orphan with zero noble blood, to step right in and take advantage.
But Chandragupta didn't do it alone. The mastermind behind his rise was Kautilya, who you might also know as Chanakya. Now, Kautilya was a brilliant, highly ruthless Brahmin scholar and an absolute genius when it came to political strategy. After being publicly humiliated by the Nanda king, he swore revenge. When he met young Chandragupta, he didn't just see some street kid. He saw raw, untapped potential. Kautilya became his mentor, basically acting as the architect for this incredibly audacious plan to just take over the entire empire.
Now, they knew a direct military assault against the massive Nanda army was total suicide. So instead, they pulled off something closer to a heist movie, relying on intense psychological warfare. Step 1, raise a small, highly mobile force. Step 2, spread devastating rumors to sow dissension among the top Nanda generals. Step 3, paralyze the Nanda king with so much paranoia that his empire just started fighting itself. It was honestly brilliant. By 322 BC, the whole Nanda Empire collapsed from the inside out, crowning a 25-year-old nobody as the brand new emperor.
Part 2. Building a superpower.
Over the next 2 decades, this former street orphan transformed into an unstoppable conqueror. Chandragupta and Kautilya systematically unified the subcontinent. They pushed their borders from the Indus River in the west all the way to the Ganges in the east, encompassing a staggering 5 million square kilometers. And to do this, they relied on the ultimate ancient battlefield tank, the war elephant. 500, that is the massive surplus of war elephants Chandragupta casually traded to Alexander the Great's successor, Seleucus Nicator, in 305 BC. Why? Just to secure vast western territories in modern-day Afghanistan and Persia. The guy literally had so much military muscle, he could trade it for land.
But here's the thing. Chandragupta wasn't just some warlord. He was an administrative visionary. He engineered this massive royal highway stretching from coast to coast. He also set up systematic taxation, taking about 1/6 to 1/4 of agricultural output. But unlike the Nandas, he actually gave people something in return. He provided irrigation, security, and roads. All of this was managed by a super centralized bureaucracy, with provincial governors reporting directly to him. Oh, and it was entirely backed by a standing army of hundreds of thousands. Then, the story takes a wildly unexpected turn. In 298 BC, at the absolute peak of his wealth, his success, and absolute power, Chandragupta completely shocked his entire empire. He just walked away. He abdicated the throne, handed control over to his son Bimbisara, and gave up his opulent palace, his riches, the whole shebang. He left to become a wandering ascetic, a Jain monk. He lived out his final years in total simplicity, eventually dying in a southern mountain cave around 297 BC. Truly wild.
Part 3. The Blood of Kalinga.
So, let's fast forward a bit to 272 BC. Chandragupta's grandson, Ashoka, claims the throne, but he only gets it after a brutal, violent succession war against his own brother, Susuma. Ashoka inherited his grandfather's massive, incredibly stable empire, but unfortunately he also inherited his relentless hunger for military conquest. 8 years into his reign, in 260 BC, Ashoka marched his armies into Kalinga, which was an independent kingdom in modern-day Odisha. The result? An absolute bloodbath. A staggering 100,000 soldiers died. Entire villages were burned to the ground, and the survivors were heavily enslaved or displaced. It was a complete military victory, sure, but achieved at just an unspeakable human cost.
Part 4. The Pacifist Empire.
Instead of throwing a massive victory parade to celebrate his newly expanded borders, that horrific carnage triggered a crushing depression in Ashoka. Completely haunted by the slaughter, he went through a total spiritual awakening. He embraced Buddhism and the absolute principle of ahimsa or nonviolence. He famously declared, "Conquest through moral principles is a conquest of justice." This was a massive, radical pivot from everything his grandfather had built. Ashoka decided that a truly great emperor doesn't rule through violence and fear. He rules through morality, virtue, and active compassion.
And he actually put his money where his mouth was with the famous edicts of Ashoka. He had these deeply moral declarations carved directly into 33 major rocks and massive pillars across his entire realm. These weren't just standard laws, they were revolutionary. He officially renounced military conquest. He used state funds to build hospitals, not just for humans, but for animals too. He created welfare systems for the poor and the elderly, and granted unprecedented protections to women and religious minorities. Virtually overnight, he transformed the Mauryas into the world's first truly multi-ethnic, multi-religious empire.
Now, his vision definitely did not stop at the borders of India. Remarkably, Ashoka sent out over 120,000 missionaries into the wider world. He dispatched them to Sri Lanka, Thailand, China, and all across Central Asia to spread the teachings of Buddhism globally. Think about that. He used the immense logistical power and crazy wealth of his empire not to send conquering armies to burn things down, but to export ideas of peace and compassion.
The crazy part is, the decisions this guy made over 2 millennia ago are literally still echoing today. Ashoka's 120,000 ancient missionaries, they are directly responsible for the immense global spread of Buddhism, directly shaping the beliefs of over 500 million followers living right now. Sacred sites he patronized, like Sanchi Stupa and Bodh Gaya, are still standing. And his rock-carved edicts laid down a foundational philosophy of multiculturalism that still completely resonates in modern India.
But what actually happens to an empire built on peace when the pacifist is gone? Well, following Ashoka's death in 232 BC, the Maurya Empire faced a fatal crisis. You see, his successors lacked both his immense moral authority and the raw, terrifying military ambition of his grandfather Chandragupta. Without a unifying moral vision or the threat of brutal force, the empire fragmented incredibly fast. Regional powers like the Cholas and Satavahanas broke away. Finally, in 185 BC, a general named Pushyamitra led a military coup against the very last emperor, Brihadratha, permanently ending the dynasty.
Which brings us right back to the ultimate question we started with, and the thought I really want to leave you pondering today. Does a truly great empire rely on the fear of its military or the vision of its morality? Chandragupta absolutely proved you can unite a fragmented continent with brilliant strategy and a massive army. But Ashoka proved you can rule that exact same continent with compassion, leaving a legacy of peace that outlasts the empire itself by thousands of years. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope it gave you a fresh perspective on some truly amazing ancient history. Keep learning, and I'll see you in the next one.